10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I apologize if you were listening before. I was trying to do this live, and for some reason, the internet, my system, everything is going wrong, and it was not broadcasting. And I apologize for that because that should never be the case. But it seems that was the case, and that was going on, and so we're going to try and fix that. That being said, let's take a look at what I wanted to talk about today. And that is, I want to talk about Governor Andrew Cuomo, the red flag legislation, and what is being misled to the public. Because there's a lot of details that are being missed or being obscured or misreported or not reported at all. And these are all critical things. We're talking about our lives here. We're talking about people's reputations, their lives, their families, our property. We're talking about the Second Amendment and so much more, and it's not being discussed properly. And I don't mean it because that's how I feel. I'm talking about this is the law and these are facts that I'm going to be addressing with you. And I think it's critical. I think it's absolutely important that we get it right. Okay, so let's talk about this. Now, you may recall back in February, actually before then, but let's go to February. In February, Governor Cuomo and the single party rule of New York State, which is currently the Democratic Party, they all got in line and said, we're going to ban the Second Amendment, or as close to it as they could. Part of that action was the red flag laws that they passed, and that was in February of 2019. This is a supplement to the New York SAFE Act, which was passed in 2013. And the whole idea was that you are going to be safe. Now, because they passed this law, criminals will no longer go out and have firearms, and you will be safe. And they can no one's going to make bombs or use cars. No one's ever going to do anything that's going to harm you because they passed this law against rifles, essentially. That isn't the case, but that's what the promise was. You're going to be safe. Okay, so let's go with that promise. That's what was said by Governor Cuomo by the New York State Legislature. 6 months later, in August, we saw that on August 24th of 2019, the law went into effect. Okay, the red flag law became effective in New York State. Now, this is an important thing because for 6 months, from February until August, nothing was done. Not one rule, not one regulation, not one explanation was made to tell the public, more importantly, to tell the government, the state and local government, what to do. Now, you may say, Mike, well, that can't be true. That's not possible. How would they pass a law and not tell people how to execute the law, how that they should function with this law? Well, it is true because I spoke with the office for Broome County Executive Jason Garnar. And Jason, his office, which are very open and very friendly to me most of the time, I spoke with them. I sent them a letter asking in August, actually in September, and I asked them how much is going to be spent by Broome County on the new red flag legislation and what programs may be cut from Broome County and the residents of Broome County to make up that money. And the answer I got back from the office of Broome County Executive Jason Garnar is they have no idea. They did not count it, and they do not know. Let me say that again. The county executive for Broome County of New York had no idea how much money it would cost to enforce the red flag legislation, nor did they have guidance from the state of New York on how it's supposed to execute this law. I also know for a fact that the county executive had reached out to several other law enforcement organizations in the county, and those individuals had no idea how this law is supposed to be executed. So you have a bunch of government officials from the state and the local level that have no idea how to do something that was passed 6 months earlier. For 6 months, Governor Cuomo and the New York State Legislature gave no guidance on how this law is supposed to be enacted. So nobody knows how they're supposed to do this. Nobody knows how much money it's going to cost. No one knows what kind of training is necessary for it. No one knows what it takes to execute this. How many people, how many vehicles, what they're supposed to do. Judges don't know how they're supposed to legislate on this and how they're supposed to pass the warrants. There's no idea. These are people who are just doing it in the dark because they have no idea what's going on. And that's kind of scary when you stop and think about it. It's terrifying, actually, that after 6 months, no one knows what's going on. But within that 6-month period of time, there was something that did happen that is very important. Because it was in September, just after the law became effective, that we saw that the first red flag action of New York took place. That was on September 13th, as reported by the New York Post. And the article was, "Man becomes first to lose guns under New York's red flag law." Now, this is very important, and I want people to look this up for themselves, okay? Because it has nothing to do with the Broome County executive. What it does have to do with is how this law is supposed to be enforced, okay? And I want you to be clear about this. Nobody knew. The government had not said how they're supposed to enforce this law. And so what they did do under this red flag legislation, as reported by the New York Post, is that this man, a certain gentleman, Robert King, he was busted. He was arrested for shooting a car and then threatening to harm himself. Okay, so let's get this right. A 51-year-old man. So this is not a mass shooter by definition or what we've seen classically. He's Robert King, 51. He's illegally possessing and firing a pistol that struck a New York, Lebanon vehicle. A car in New Lebanon, excuse me. So let's put this into perspective. A guy has a gun, he brandishes that firearm, and he shoots a vehicle. The gun he is possessing is illegal. What is New York State supposed to do? What is the proper thing to do in this case? They decided to go and charge him with the red flag legislation. That is stupid. The red flag legislation is a misdemeanor. But what you could charge him with, and by the way, you look it up under New York State penal law, and you go into New York State penal law section 265, and under section 265, there is criminal possession of a weapon, there is the criminal use of a firearm, there is the where's that other one? Aggravated criminal possession of a weapon. But let's look at a couple of the simple cases here. What you can charge him with is the prohibited use of a firearm. You can charge him with the criminal use of a firearm in the first degree, and you can charge him with criminal possession of a firearm. These are three very simple things that you can charge this individual with. And guess what? If you did charge him with those, not the red flag law, but you charged him for owning an illegal weapon and firing that illegal weapon, he would get somewhere between 6 years and 9 years in jail. He would go to jail for somewhere between 6 and 9 years because he had a legal firearm and he used it in public. That's the law. Does that have anything to do with the red flag legislation? No. It doesn't protect anyone. It's not saving any schools. It's not a rifle. He had a handgun. Is anyone being protected by the red flag law? Absolutely nobody. And you have to wonder about that because that's what the red flag law says. They're going to protect you because this guy is dangerous to himself and others. But we already have laws that deal with that. He had an illegal firearm. We have a law for that. He used it in public. We have a law for that. He used that in endangered people. We have a law for that. The red flag law does nothing. It's useless. If there was no red flag law, this guy would get between 6 to 9 years in jail. That's what the law has. Instead, because it was September 13th, since the red flag law was put in place on August 24th, the government needed to show a way, Andrew Cuomo needed a way to show people how this is protecting them, how he did the right thing, that New York State legislature did the right thing by taking away people's rights to their firearm. And so they charged him with the red flag law, which is a less severe charge. It's a 1-year penalty. 1 year, he doesn't have to have a firearm. He's going to go to jail he's going to have them come and take his firearms for 1 year instead of the 6 to 9 years that he would have gotten in March or April or May or June of 2019. Does that sound like you're safer? Does that sound like that's the way the law is supposed to work? Does that sound like anything that makes sense? Okay, let's try and work our way through this. So it doesn't make sense. It's not making people safer. It's not a law that the way it's supposed to be used. But they are using it that way because it confuses people. Well, we're using this law to take criminals off the streets. We're going to take away those guns. Well, the problem wasn't so much the gun, which was illegal in the first place. He's not supposed to have it. He wasn't supposed to use it that way. There's your problem. Not whether or not he endangered himself or others. That was a secondary. That was a side effect of the fact that he was shooting an illegal gun, Robert King, on September 13th. But let's see. Governor Cuomo, a man who is known for never missing an opportunity, then went and yesterday, September 18th, he went out and he said, let me explain to people how great the red flag law is. Let me explain to people how it's protecting them, how it's going to help our kids be protected. And we're going to go through this together on what he had to say. It takes a minute, but the explanation of what he's talking about is going to take a little bit longer. But let's go through this together, okay? So this is Governor Cuomo speaking before a crowd yesterday, talking about the red flag legislation and how it's going to protect you. And this is the article from Newsday, New York to show schools, parents, how to use red flag law. So let's hear Governor Cuomo.
Banned assault weapons 6 years ago. No one has come up to me in that time and said, you know what? I had a legal right to buy a gun and I was deprived of that right. Nobody in 6 months. Now.
Okay, stop right there. Governor Cuomo starts off, or at least this segment from Newsday starts off and says, oh, no one's come up to me. I passed the New York SAFE Act and everyone's safe and no one's told me it's a bad law. Well, there's two reasons why Andrew Cuomo can say that with a straight face. And that is, one, Andrew Cuomo doesn't talk to people. He doesn't go around and speak to normal people. Andrew Cuomo won't even speak to the press. Andrew Cuomo only does press events, kind of like the one we're seeing right there, where you can't ask him questions, where you can't challenge him on the facts or the supposed facts he's putting out to the public. All you get are statements from his office, but if he's at an event, he won't answer the public or the news media. That is a known fact. So for him to say that no one's come up to him and said that, I'm not surprised. He doesn't talk to anyone. Come out to Broome County, come hang out with me, and I will get you people who will ask you a lot of questions about that and tell you a lot of things about the New York SAFE Act that you probably don't know about, Andrew. But let's go on to the second reason why Andrew Cuomo can say that the SAFE Act has, no one's had a complaint about it. And that's very simple as well, because 97% of New York State don't follow the New York SAFE Act. It was rejected by, as far as I'm aware, every single law enforcement agency in the state. I'm not aware, except at the very beginning, I think there were 2 or 3 arrests. But other than that, there's been no one who's been arrested under the SAFE Act. There's been no one who's been charged with it. The DAs don't use it. The police don't use it. The public doesn't follow it. Nobody follows this law. Remember, we had to go to court or actually certain gun groups, went to court and they had to get subpoenas and force him to show that 97% of New York State's gun owners do not follow the New York SAFE Act. Besides all of the published, documented for 9 years now, 6 years now, people, all the agencies, law enforcement, that have said they won't follow this law. So I don't know what he's saying that, oh, no one's told him that. No wonder. You don't talk to people and no one's following the law. So of course they don't tell you that. But let's go on to see what else he has to say here. And that'll be...
Gun control, gun safety is controversial, and people don't like it ideologically. But there is common sense that can be brought to this. Over 80% of the times that a person took a violent action, there were warning signs, and over 80% other people knew.
Stop right there. Okay. So he wants to bring up, look at this, 80% of the time, there's people knew there's going to be a problem, and we could do something about that. Wait a minute, we don't need the red flag legislation for that. What we need, as has been proven in many studies, what we need, recently the Parkland shooting, the father of one of the victims noted 45 times the police showed up at the house of the Parkland, Florida shooter and did not arrest him. They did not follow up. We've seen that in many, many mass shooting cases where the police are notified, they are aware, and do not follow up. We've seen that in bombings. We've seen that in terrorist events, domestic terrorism events in the United States, where people know, and either they did tell law enforcement and law enforcement didn't act on it, or that they didn't tell anyone. But we have laws in place for that. Because when they do tell them, as happened with back in May, when 4 young men, former Boy Scouts, decided that they wanted to bomb Islamburg, New York, well, they told one of their friends in high school, overheard that, told the authorities, the police investigated it, and then they arrested them for a bomb threat, for threatening to kill people with bombs, which, by the way, bombs are illegal. Since 1934, bombs are illegal. I don't know how many times I have to say that. It's illegal to make a bomb, whether you're going to use it or not. And that fact that it is illegal for more than 5 decades has not stopped people from making bombs in New York State or across the country. Having the law does not prevent criminals and the insane from going and using and breaking the law. So I don't know what they're talking about here. But guess what? The Islamburg plot was stopped not because of the red flag law. It wasn't any teachers. It wasn't someone coming to confiscate the guns in the houses. It wasn't someone denying people their Second Amendment rights. It was very simply police following the law that exists and enforcing that law that exists. And it saved lives, not the red flag law, not gun control. People following the law that already exists. It wasn't the SAFE Act that saved anyone. It wasn't the red flag laws. It was police following the law that exists. And that's it. That's all you need. But, Governor Cuomo, he has a different point of view about this, obviously. So let's see what else he has a different point of view on as he continues to speak.
That is frightening, but it's also an opportunity. And that's the red flag law. It says if you feel something, you hear something, you have a direct access through your school principal or principal's designee, and that is a direct access for action. You don't
stop right there. He just mentioned something. I'm going to go back a little bit on that, but he says, if you see something, you do something. You've seen that. He's verbatim. He's stealing the whole 9/11, the whole anti-terrorism message of the United States and co-opting it for his red flag law. If you see something, say something. Well, I'm sorry, that already exists. And that was because of terrorism. That's because of 9/11. It has nothing to do with you, Governor Cuomo. It has nothing to do with your gun control ideas. It has nothing to do with your suppression of the Second Amendment. That's not the reason. But he decided that's what he wants to talk about. That's what he wants people to think about. He wants to put the message out there like he's fighting terrorism. This isn't terrorism we're talking about. This is about taking people's property and denying the Second Amendment. That's very much what it's about. But let's go a little bit further and a little bit deeper into what he said there. Because he said, well, and he's speaking to a bunch of teachers, and he's saying, well, you, through the principal or his designee, can go straight to the courts. Well, let's be clear. When he says you're a designee, the law is very clear. It's not the principal. It's not up to the principal. It has nothing to do with the principal. In fact, if you actually look at the law, which I have done many times, and this is from the New York State Assembly, it's section number 1, definitions for the purposes of the article. This is the law as passed in January 24th of 2019, S2451. This is the red flag law as it exists. This is what was written. And in there, if you look it through, you'll see that under Section C, basically, and Section C starts here and it continues all the way down to there. Basically, anybody in a school can go and make a red flag legislation. It doesn't say the principal. No, it says the administrator's designee. Okay, that means a teacher. It means a part-time badminton coach. It means a temporary substitute teacher. It means just about everyone except the janitor at a school can and may put out a red flag law based on their feelings. And this is something that, Governor Cuomo is going to get into a little bit more in this next segment here as we listen to him. And he's going to say something else that's very important. I want you to hear this clearly.
You don't have to go to the family. You don't have to go to a law enforcement officer. You have direct access.
Wait a minute. Don't you want to go to a law enforcement officer? Isn't that the whole idea? That you go to the police to make them aware, like what happened in Islamberg, New York, that someone went to the police to protect the public? Isn't that their job? But he's saying don't go to the police. Don't go to the family, which also could be a way to resolve this. No, he wants you to go and talk to the courts so that they can take away someone's rights. But okay, let's see what else he has to say about that.
And maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. But that's for a judge to decide.
Stop right there. Wait a minute. So maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. Do you understand the consequences, Governor Cuomo, of what you're talking about here? Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. If you are wrong, if you have wrongfully put out a red flag legislation, think about what you have just done. You have just caused someone to be written about in the newspaper. You have just caused someone to have their reputation destroyed, that they're going to be affected in every school and every area they go to, that children may be around, that other adults are. They may lose their job, both because of the impression of what they did and also the time it would take to go to the courts to try and defend their name. You have to go and since every newspaper in your region at least is going to note this and speak about it, kind of like with Robert King, that he happens to be in New Lebanon, but in New York City, they are writing about him. And here I am in Broome County, New York, and I am talking about him. Your reputation is gone. You're never going to get it back, even if Robert King, the first person to be charged with the red flag legislation in New York State, even if he wins his case, which seems very unlikely because he has other crimes that are being committed, he's never going to be able to retract or have every newspaper and every media outlet acknowledge that he was somehow innocent. His life is destroyed. His family can be removed from him because of this. He can lose his job from this, assuming that he's innocent, as everyone should be considered. But the answer from Andrew Cuomo is, well, it's okay. You might be wrong. It's okay if you're wrong. By the way, looking at the law itself, looking at the New York red flag law, if you were to look through this and you're trying to find out what happens if you're wrong, what if you maliciously, wrongfully, absolutely get it wrong and someone is innocent, there is not a single line in the law that says that anything happens. If you go out there and I'll give you a great example. If Citizen Action or Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow or a Socialist Democrat decided that they wanted to claim, for whatever reason, that I am a danger to myself or the public, I, Michael Valls, Dragon of the Southern Tier, and they went to the court and they said, I think Michael Vasquez, he is a danger to the public and you need to take and confiscate all of his firearms in his home. And the judge, not knowing anything and seeing, I don't know, maybe they show him a clip of my YouTube videos. Maybe they show him some of the writing that I've done, the 2 million words I've written, and they take a paragraph out of context. Maybe they see that I went out and I bought a hammer and some nails and a saw because I was working on my water heater last night. And so they saw that I had tools and I went and bought some. And that, by definition in New York State, means I have a deadly weapon. A hammer in New York State is a deadly weapon, which is justification for that judge to say, you know what, you're right. He is dangerous because I don't like his YouTube video. I don't like the video the comment he made on Facebook. So you're right, he's dangerous. And the police can come over and come to my door with a warrant from that judge and take my property. And guess what? When they find out there's nothing wrong, that there is nothing that has been done, my reputation is destroyed, my livelihood will be destroyed. And then when they find out they're wrong, what? The other person goes, Citizen Action, Progressive Leaders Tomorrow, the Socialist Democrats, they go, oops, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. I felt like I was right, but I got it wrong. Is that the answer? Is that the repercussion? Because if they wanted to do that just to be malicious, just to try and stop me from making podcasts like this, that can happen. That scenario I just described can happen at any moment. And what? They're just going to be able to say, oops, sorry, didn't know. Even though they did it on purpose. This is a weapon. This is a weapon. And the weapon has no penalty for being used. And that's what Governor Cuomo is saying. It's okay. Well, a judge will figure it out. A judge is a human being. He only knows the evidence that you present to him. And it doesn't take a lot of evidence, according to the red flag law, to get it wrong. But okay, let's go on with what else did Governor Cuomo have to say here. And let's see what else he has to say.
You don't have the authority. You're not going to take anything from anybody. All you're going to say is, I think this should be looked at because I think there may well be a problem.
Just substitute the words I think with I may be. And that's the thing. I feel.
Here.
And that's the big thing. Governor Cuomo is saying, hey, your feelings.
Presenting a unique interactive experience that puts you into the conversation.
Sorry about that. So what he's saying here is your feelings are all that's necessary. As long as you feel like you're doing the right thing, then that's okay. That you can destroy someone's life and take their property and have the government act as your weapon to bludgeon somebody, both in the physical and as well as the economic and emotional sense, to bludgeon them. And it's okay. Even if you're wrong, even if you did it for the wrong reasons, it's okay. There's another thing in here that's kind of interesting in the article by Newsday that no one really talks about, and I think is insanely important to bring up as well. And you're going to see it in here that in the article by Newsday, as they said, and they're talking about this, about the law, and they go in and they mention in this one section here, the law allows relatives, teachers, administrators, and others in schools, basically everybody except the janitor, to ask a judge to issue an order to put the firearms out of reach for youths deemed to be at risk to themselves and others, except the law has been used not for youth. The only person it's been used against is a 51-year-old person. I, being 51, I like to think of myself as young, but that's not the case. The legal process includes a hearing, which no one is invited to. You, the accused, is never asked to be there. No due process. But here's the big thing. The first reports can be made anonymously. Anonymously. So let me get this right. So somebody that I will never see, or I may never see, can go. So a member of Plot, a member of Citizen Action, a socialist Democrat who doesn't like my channel, who doesn't like me and what I have to say, they can go to a court tomorrow anonymously and have a hearing without me ever knowing about it, because I'll never be told, to determine whether or not I am a danger to the public and or myself. I do not get to defend myself on this. And I don't get to hear or find out who it is who has accused me of this, using evidence that I have no idea about, that is presented to a judge, which may or may not be prejudicial, like the fact that I bought a hammer yesterday, which is a weapon according to New York State. And that's the excuse, all the excuse they need. And the only time I find out about this is when the police would bang on my door somewhere between 5 and 8 in the morning, as these things tend to go. And they're going to be banging on my door to come in and take every firearm they could find in this household, if not, that they exist. And that's the first time I'm going to find out about it. The very first time I would find out about it. And then I would have to go to court, and I have to force the court to tell me who it is who accused me, because it's secret. And when they're proven wrong, that they get to walk away scot-free, and I have to defend and rebuild my broken life at that point. Does this sound like it's fair or useful? Like this is helping anyone whatsoever? At all? For laws that we already have in place. Laws that we can pinpoint to the day. I can show you, as I just have, laws that already do what the red flag law claims to be able to do and protects the public far better than what the red flag law is saying. Because if we're going to, as in the case of Robert King, who's been identified as the first person to be arrested under the red flag law, or to be charged with the red flag legislation, because the red flag legislation doesn't even need a crime to exist. It just needs a feeling. And so long as there is a feeling, you can be punished by the red flag law. And what we're seeing here is that there are other laws that are better suited to do this, that are more effective, rather than just taking away a gun for a year, and when a crime has been done and the person can get 6 to 9 years, we're going to go and just take away their property for a year. If it's bad enough that it's a crime, then he should be punished under the crimes in the law that we have, not something for politics. Maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but I think I've explained it very clearly. I think I've shown the examples very clearly. This is a problem, people. This is a danger to New York State. And it is a danger, it's a costly one at that. Because as I mentioned with Representative Garnar, Executive Garnar, Broome County Executive, he has no idea how much this is going to cost. He has no idea what kind of training needs to be done. He has no idea how to do this. And I'm not blaming him for this. The state hasn't told anyone until yesterday. They've had over 6 months to tell people how this is supposed to go down and how much it's going to cost. And they have ignored it. And the answer that they give us is, don't worry, go to the court, forget about the laws that exist, and if you get it wrong, oops, it's okay. How much money do you think that's going to cost in lawsuits? Because I guarantee you, if a member of Plot, if a member of Citizen Action, if a socialist Democrat winds up going to the courts and I have half a dozen police officers show up at my door trying to take my firearm, my property, I am not going to let it go by with a simple oops. I'm going to sue the living daylights out of New York State, Governor Cuomo, and every other level of government that allowed it to go through. Because there's no proof, as should any gun owner or anyone else. And that's just a simple case of how we can see how bad this can be. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you think I don't get it. And maybe you can explain this better than I can. Maybe you read that law as I have, and you see something that I don't see in it, where it's better for the public, that it somehow protects people from criminals and the deranged who are not addressed in this at all, but are actually being shielded by these kinds of laws. When we're not dealing with the actual underlying issue that makes someone say the only answer is to kill innocent people. That's the problem with mass shootings. That's the problems with illegal gun use, is someone decides that the human beings around them are not valuable enough to stay alive, that they can kill them with impunity. That is the root problem. And the red flag law does nothing to address that or to prevent it or to penalize people for that thought. And that is our problem. I don't blame Jason Garnar, Executive Garnar. I don't blame him because it's got nothing to do with him. This is Andrew Cuomo. This is the single party of New York dictating to the people that if you use your rights, your Second Amendment rights in particular, well, you need to be punished because they don't like it. And I am terrified when a government is being run by individuals based on their gut feelings, not laws, gut feelings. And those feelings are based in politics. That is a problem. You may disagree with it. I want to hear what you have to think. Let me know. Reach out to me on YouTube. Reach out to me on Facebook. I know that they're not letting me do this live. Fine. But I read all of the comments. I read all of the messages. And I will respond. And I will get back to you. And if enough people ask, I will make a video about it. But until then, what I do want to say is I thank you for your time here with me today. I'm sorry that the live stream could not happen. But check this out, share this amongst your friends, and let me know what you think. All right? I'll talk to you again soon.